That was the first part. The second part is about writing unit tests. There are different sorts of tests. You have unit tests, integration tests, acceptance tests. For this demo, we'll just see how we can write a unit test. And writing unit tests, it's really simple. It's just creating a class, adding the references to NUnit or whatever testing framework you would like to use. And maybe a mocking framework such as mock. So let's see how that works. For this module, we don't have a lot of complex functionality, but we'll see how it works nonetheless. So I pre-created a class library called harvest count placeholder demo tests. For this demo, we'll just create a unit test for the placeholder service we created. And because it's service, let's create a services folder. And a class called placeholder service tests. So in this case, we'll be using NUnit, which has a couple of attributes to specify that this is a test class. It's called a test fixture. And this tells NUnit that this is a test class. Tests generally consist of arranging the environment for the unit of code that you want to test. Then you want to execute that unit of code and then assert that certain conditions are true. So it's basically an arrange, act, assert. So let's create a simple test. If we have a look at our content placeholder service, we'll see a method called getContentByName. So let's try and assert that if we invoke this method, that it actually returns the expected content item. So let's create a method for that. Let's call it getContentByName should return expected content. And this is an actual test, so we'll decorate this with a test attribute. So what we need is our object that we want to test. So let's create a constructor. And I'm using snippets because it's boring watching me type. I'll walk you through this. Because we're using inversion of control in a dependency container, well, we're going to use that for unit tests as well, because that makes it so much easier. So what we're doing here, this is our system under test, our placeholder service. That's the subject of our test. Let's create a field for that. And we're using the container to resolve it, because if our class has a couple of dependencies, we'll use the container to resolve those. But for those, in order to be resolvable, they need to be registered with a container. So that's what we're doing here. We have a dependency on the content manager, but we want to write a unit test. We're not writing an integration test, so we're not newing up an actual content manager. Instead, we're going to mock it. And we're using mock, the mocking framework. So this is basically our, I'm doing this in a constructor, but instead we don't want to do this once. We want to execute this for each method that we run. So instead of doing it in a constructor, we'll create a method called init. I forgot the attribute for that. Setup, thank you. Thanks, that's it. Okay, so this is the setup for a test, this will be executed per test method. For this get content by name should return the content. Test method will arrange something, then we'll execute what we want to test and we'll assert. So this is a little bit of more setup. We're welding that part onto our content item quickly. And here we're using mock to, instead of creating a mocked version of iContent Manager, we're using the mocking framework and using its setup method to tell the proxy being generated what to return when the get method gets invoked. That's what we're doing here. So whenever a get gets invoked and it passes through any integer, which it's the ID for the content item to load, then we'll just return our expected content item. And same goes for query. When that is invoked, we'll return a content query and we'll initialize. I created a stub for that, a content query stub, which will return whatever we specify here as part of the constructor. Then we perform the actual test method that we want to test, get content item by name, and we'll assert that it's the same as the expected content item we just created. So let's see if this passes, and it does. Are there any questions about about the previous part or this part? Yeah, you have to bring that in manually. I already added the references to mock as well as NUnit. Yeah, you need to do that yourself, including adding a reference to the module that you want to test, the module project. Yeah.
Why not use mocks instead of container? Is there using container to inject
Yeah.
particular implementation of interfaces?
Come again?
Hold on, because nobody else can hear you.
Sorry, I'm not talking too loud. Yeah, I was just asking, why are you using the container? You resolve dependencies there, the iPlaceholder service, for example. Why not use mocks instead?
What do you mean, why not use mocks instead?
Yeah.
Because this is mocking and dependency containers. They're two different things, of course. Yeah. And using the container build, it's a nice way to just register the dependencies that I know I'm going to need, instead of manually newing the classes up and then specifying, passing in the dependencies manually. That's just a lot of more work. So that's why we're using container builder here. And instead of manually mocking, in this case we could have done that maybe for the content manager. We could do
because
that.
you are still coupling your test with the one concrete class, sorry, the placeholder service. Well, for me, for example, it's not a strict unit test. You're still integration test.
With what?
Because you are still coupling your test with a concrete implementation, which is the placeholder service. Ah, yeah. Okay, I see.
Exactly. Yeah, the goal of this
Alright.
unit test is to, so it's unit testing the get content item by name method in this
So
case.
why don't you just do a new placeholder service?
I could do that. In this
Yeah.
case, it would be not a lot of more work, but imagine you have a service class with a couple of more dependencies. So in this case, I just have one dependency, the iContent manager, but maybe I have a couple of them, more of them, and and those dependencies, for example, if I do want to do an integration test, then those need to be resolved as well. So that's where containers really come in. So in this case, it's overkill. I agree.
Yeah, he's trying to show you how to create a unit test, how you will do that. Now, in this example is stupid, but on purpose. No, he knows that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, but the goal is for you, when you come back home and work, you copy-paste that, and you can extend it with your own services and dependencies.
The thing I don't understand is if you do that, the container is going to inject automatically instances of other dependencies of that class.
Mm-hmm.
But in that case, it's integration test, it's not unit test. Because you want to mock those dependencies as well.
Yeah, true. In this case, because all the dependencies would be mocks, so you're not, maybe not you don't have to register with container, but it's nice to do it like this because sometimes you have a lot of arguments to pass in, and the container helps you with that, resolving the system on the test. So, but you can totally do it without if you prefer that way. Yeah, but when it comes to integration tests, then it's probably more useful even. Yeah.
Other questions?
Me again. Yeah, I guess services are the easiest ones to test. What about migrations, drivers, handlers?
Yep.
Because if here, for example, something I didn't know is the content query stub,
Mm-hmm.
which looks very useful. I didn't know about this one, so I couldn't. I didn't test my content manager, basically, the codes to it.
Yeah.
So that's something definitely I will do now.
Yeah, that's a bit of a more complex class, I think. But it's easy to create a stub for that. It's not part of the Orchard framework. This is what I created myself. But as you can see, it's mostly empty, just returning itself, not doing anything intelligent. Your question about what about unit testing other classes such as drivers, and migrations, they are also classes, so you can totally unit test them as well. But sometimes you have a lot of setup to do. For example, when you test a driver, it has the editor and display methods, but they are protected. So you either need to create a spy so that you can assert that certain methods have been invoked, or set a couple of private fields, or you set up the environment so that you can invoke the update editor method of a driver, which will in turn invoke the protected methods. You can totally do that. I actually have code for that, which I'll upload as well. Same thing, it's a class. So you can totally... yeah, okay, so that's more of an integration test if you want to actually see the database being created and updated. Then in Orchard, there's a database-enabled tests class, which will totally help you with that.
Any other questions?
Okay, great. So you have your module, you have your unit tests, and at some point if it's meant to be reused by others, you want to create a package and upload it to the gallery. So in Orchard, we have a package create command, which makes it really simple to turn your module into a NuGet package. So let's see how that works. The command line lives in the bin folder of your Orchard installation. And it's called orchard.exe. So the command is called packets create. Okay, packets create. It wants the name of the module, which is called harvest content placeholder demo. And it wants the output path. So let's add it, create it in C packages. Okay, so that's been created. If we have a look. And there we have it, a new get packets. We can quickly inspect its contents. So it contains all of our source code for our module. And the next step will be to create an account if you don't have one already at gallery.orchardproject.net and upload your packets and share it with the rest. I don't have an internet connection right now, so I can't show that, but it should speak for itself. Once you have a module up there, you can of course download it. You can also include it in your recipe. So for example, you create a new website, or maybe you have a baseline of web applications, and then it helps to have recipes, and that's the next subject of this talk. Recipes, which it's really powerful thing. It enables Orchard to import and export content items, content types, and parts. It allows you to enable features, disable them, include data, settings, commands. It's also extensible, so you can implement custom recipe steps, which will be executed during setup, or you can execute recipes after the fact. So if you have an Orchard instance, you can go to modules, and there's a recipes tab where you can execute custom recipes to quickly set up websites. So let's see how a recipe looks like. We'll start with a recipe we can use when we create a new instance of Orchard, where we can choose our own recipe. So let's see how that works. Now let's say we create a new website called Acme. Let's create a recipe called Acme. This really is the naming convention that you need to follow. Whatever in front, then .recipe.xml. So that's a big file, but as you can see, it has some header information, the name of the recipe, description, etc. And this is something could be useful. It enables you to download modules from the gallery if they aren't downloaded already. So the same, we could uncomment this and it would download our packets from the gallery. But it's not up there, so we'll comment it out. We have a feature element which allows you to enable all sorts of features which are exposed by the modules installed. And then comes the metadata element, which obviously enables you to define which content types you want to have Orchard created, including the parts attached. Most modules have migration files, and those create content types. But sometimes you, for example, if you create websites but not necessarily modules, You can create content types using the admin. Then you can export that metadata and paste it in here. And then quickly reuse it in a new website. And here comes the data section, which you don't have to type this in manually. You'll simply use the export feature of Orchard, paste it in here. And as you can see, here we have exported the placeable page, which has the placeable part with its name, advertisement, and a placeholder widget with a placeholder part with the target content item ID. And that's why we implemented the import-export method in the driver, so that we can reuse it in our recipe. We can export settings and paste it in here, and migration, I still have to figure that one out, never used it. And we can execute whatever command. We can create our own commands and execute it here, or execute existing commands. So let's see. If we want to use this recipe, we need to copy it over to the Orchard setup module. So that's more or less your custom build of Orchard. So let's do that now. So here we have a fresh Orchard copy. So this is a clean vanilla Orchard instance. We'll go to the Orchard setup module. And this module has a recipes folder where you see the out-of-the-box recipes. And here we'll paste in our own recipe. So I'm quickly opening the new Orchard instance in Visual Studio so we can run it. So we hit contribute and we add a new module. Okay, so the gallery read in our module manifest. Cool. So let's provide a couple of tags, widget, placeholder, content. Okay, so we don't have a logo right now, but we can change that later. Finish. Okay, so now we need to wait, I think, a minute or so before it becomes available. Let's watch the home page. So we're setting up a new website, we created a recipe called Acme. And as you recall, in the recipe, we're downloading Vandelay and harvest content placeholder and enabling a bunch of features, importing data, etc. So let's try it. That's an error. Let's see. Whenever you see this after setting up, usually there's an error, and you should be able to find out about that in app data, logs, error. So as we can see, it failed to execute a step. And we can simply retry by deleting everything in app data. Okay, I'll try one more time. And if it fails, then this demo is complete. You all want? Great.
Sipke, Sipke, Sipke.
This is a different error. It's using this updated name. Maybe I made a typo. Let me see. Content placeholder demo. Thank you. That's it. You debug my module or recipe. Okay, we can fix that easily.
It takes a community.
Here you go.
This should all give you time to take up like real hard questions for him. Really difficult ones.
As you can see, it has been downloaded already currently. Well, perfect. So that's part of module development, right? You just need to keep on going until it works. So set meta, that's probably, okay, so it's your fault, thank you.
It's my fault.
I'll quickly remove that line. Okay. So that's enough troubleshooting for now. That's recipes when you set it up. You can also execute recipes after you installed Orchard. So if we go to our working module here, we can add, for example, we wanted to placify all the content types, or a couple of them. We could create a recipe as part of our module so that the user doesn't have to manually attach the placeable part to their content types. Instead, he would just have to execute a recipe. So let's create a recipe called placify. The recipe.xml. So here we have a really simple recipe, just defining or enabling a feature, because this is a required feature for placeable part to work. We're attaching it to the page and blog post type. We could attach it to any other type we want, like this. So let's see if we invoke this. And then we go to the dashboard and to the module section. And here's a tab, recipes. And as you can see, we have our Acme recipe and our Placify recipe. So currently, we have a page, but it does not have the placeable part attached. So that's what's going to happen after we execute this recipe. Let's see. Execute. So now when we create a new page, we see that our placeable part has been attached. We can now create pages and have them placed anywhere using our placeholder widget. And did I forget something? No, end of slideshow. Any questions?
Beginning of the questions.
Am I right in thinking that if you say you wanted to use that module you've just created on a site that has localization, so where it's in multiple languages, that you would need to do additional work to the module to where you're retrieving the content? Would you need to do additional work in your module to return the localized content?
Good question. I think you would have to do that. Because each localized content item, it's its own content item in respect. So you would have to adjust this to pick the content item for the currently set culture. So yeah.
You just showed that you were right by hand. The recipe is this the way to generate this from a
Yeah, definitely. I never type that by hand. What I do when I create a new recipe, I copy one of the existing recipes, right? So you have the default block core recipes. So usually I copy over the default recipe, rename it, and for example, the content types and data, you can export content, metadata, and data using the import-export feature, which it's not enabled currently, but I can show you. If we go to modules, we enable the import-export feature. As Bertrand mentioned, the import-export feature is leveraging the recipe infrastructure. So now we have an import-export menu item. So here we go, export. Let's say we want to export blog posts, pages, and placeable pages, and maybe the placeholder widgets. We check off, or we check on metadata and data, and site settings. So when we save this and open it, here we have a recipe from which we can copy and paste bits and pieces and copy it, paste it into our recipe. But this is a recipe in its own right, as you can see.
One more question. Is there a way to export your current enabled modules so you can use a site which you like with the modules you use and export them for a recipe? Or
No, recipes, it will not, it doesn't contain your physical modules, right? So you would have to copy and paste over the entire folder and remove the modules you don't want to use.
okay. One more question. You showed that you can install the module from the gallery. Is there a way to install a local module if you have a proprietary module that you like to include in all your websites?
I believe there is. I think there's a way to specify which gallery or which feed to use, but I'm not sure. But I think it's possible.
You mentioned that you used the recipe, or you could use the recipe to move one local environment to somebody else, to another developer. Do you do that?
Yeah. I do that almost on any project I work with other developers. we check in the recipe as part of one of the modules or themes. And then usually what we do is implement a post-build event, and we copy over the recipe to the orchard setup recipes folder. So whenever a developer wants to start with a clean slate, he wipes out his app data folder, and then we set up the orchard instance using that recipe.
And this recipe, so you keep it updated.
Yeah.
How much data do you have there, or
Just sample data, just enough to be able to have a fully functioning website, not with production data, but sample data so that you can see how the site looks.
And you put there all the changes you make in the admin area?
Relevant changes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For
Thank you.
example, sometimes you have a custom widget. Most widgets can be exported and imported automatically, but sometimes you have to do something specifically. For example, the menu widget, it requires the menus to exist beforehand. So those you would create using a command. And if you need a new command to execute, you update the recipe.
How do you proceed then when you want to go live? You want to, you would like to take the recipe and just run it on the production server, but
maybe
you
initially.
can't.
What I usually do is move it to a staging environment. From that point on, the database should not be wiped out anymore. So then you don't work with the recipe anymore. At least I don't. Then the database becomes, that's a single database. The client may start working with it to test it, or maybe even start entering data. But at that point, you can't use the recipes, of course. You could maintain all the production data in the recipe, but then that becomes a really big recipe.
Any more questions?
I'm not sure that's the right time to ask the question, but I'll just go for it. I'm just wondering if why some of the modules, I'm not sure it's the core module, but for example, the content permissions module doesn't implement the import-export. Is there a reason for that? Or?
It does not implement import-export?
No, not. There is someone who's actually contributed, but I don't think it's part of ORCAD.
Mm-hmm. No, not sure if it's part of the core package, but
no, I don't think so.
then the developer didn't implement that. I would file a bug for that.
There's no security kind of reason for that.
Not as far as I know. Yeah, he's saying it's really simple to do, so you should do it. But there's no particular reason now. Maybe laziness or short of time. Sebastian was being lazy.
It's generally his fault. Anybody else have any questions? There's actually questions. It's okay. They can wait for you.
Sometimes we install a module and it should have an admin menu link on the left part, but it doesn't show up.
Okay, usually that indicates there's an exception occurring, but it's being swallowed by one of the try-catch handlers up the stack. So you can find out what's causing that by either checking the logs, because most errors or all errors are logged, or attach debugger. Make sure that you check off the thrown checkbox for one of the rows there. I can show you quickly. Because what will happen is whenever the exception occurs, the debugger will break right there, and then you will be able to inspect and find out what's going on. But usually that indicates an error and being swallowed.
I saw another hand here. No? Seb?
Just to answer another question about the previous question about the import-export and going to live sites. So someone from the community implemented some refactoring on the import-export to make it faster. It's included, and he also made another module which is about moving data from one instance to another one using Web API. So you can have a staging server, and you just press a button and it pushes all the data you want to another server. okay, to go from stage to production. And the idea that we have, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, is to be able to create what we call change sets on one instance and schedule those change sets to be pushed to a production server or multiple production servers. So, and everything will use those recipes. That's the idea.
That was helpful. Anybody else have one more question? Last one?
This morning, Jay talked about a module being created on his project and having a negative performance issue. What is your advice on that subject?
Well, with any performance issue, you need to start profiling to see where the bottleneck is. It could be any module that you create. I think in his case, it had something to do with communicating with a WCF service. Then you need to find out, is that the cause of the issue? Generally, watch it out of the box, or always, in my experience, it's really fast and snappy. But when you start adding modules, that you need one module in order to bog down the performance. So yeah, start with profiling and go from there.
Sipke, thank you very much.
Thank you.